Welcome to Suffolk Matters, where all of Suffolk County meets the men and women of Suffolk AME. News, opinions, and insights you won't hear anywhere else. Here's your host, the president of New York's largest independent union, Suffolk AME's Dan Leveler.
Welcome to another edition of Suffolk Matters on Walk 97.5 and 94.3 The Shark, where Suffolk County meets the men and women of Suffolk AME. News and views you can't hear anywhere else. So my guest this morning is Senator Steve Rhoads. Senator, thank you for joining us. I know, things have been very busy, very interesting year, and we'll get to all of that, but I appreciate you carving out time to be with us this morning.
Thanks for the invitation. I'm thrilled to be here.
Yeah, it's great. And, I think first and foremost, you're new to New York State Senate, but you've had a history in public service. So let's start out by, letting our listeners know what it is, the path that you took to get here.
Yeah, not a problem. Interestingly enough, now I grew up in Wantagh.
Mm-hmm.
I actually got my start in being interested in government. I got 5 points extra credit on my social studies grade in 7th grade. And my homeroom teacher knew the New York State Assemblyman at that time. And that's actually, I spent that first summer walking door to door with him. And the way he interacted with his constituents, and the way he responded in terms of listening to their complaints and concerns and going out and actually doing something about it, that always stuck with me. Mm-hmm. And that sort of got me interested in government and less interested in politics, more interested in the government part of it. The politics is sort of the necessary evil that goes along with it.
Right.
But I ended up working for him for 4 years up in the state assembly while I was going to college at the State University at Albany. Went to law school over at Hofstra.
Mm-hmm.
Got a shot to run for the Nassau County Legislature back in 2005. I got my rear end kicked in that election.
Wow, okay.
But finally in 2015, had the opportunity to win and serve, and it was a tremendous experience. And last year had the opportunity to run for the New York State Senate. Was fortunate enough to win, and just spent my first session up in Albany.
Yeah,
but it's been an interesting and wonderful journey, because at the heart of it all, is the opportunity to use government as a vehicle for good, a vehicle to try and improve the lives of your constituents, improve the lives of municipal employees, and it's been a tremendous ride so far. But I'm glad to be home, I can tell you that.
I believe it. It's been an interesting year for sure, but, freshman year as a senator, it's always fascinating to me the different levels of government and how they work. And you mentioned, constituent services, figuring out what people need, hearing about their issues, and finding paths to get things done. And I would imagine, Nassau County Legislature allowed for a bunch of that. The Senate allows for a bunch of that as well, but in different ways. And forgive me, I don't remember off the top of my head, you were in the majority when you were in the Nassau County Legislature, Correct. So your ability to get things done was different because the votes were there, right? You knew you could talk to the people on the same side of the aisle as you, knew that they shared the same values. But interestingly enough, in any election, it's never one-sided. It's not 100% of the votes came from, let's say the Republican Party, and 0 votes came in from the Democratic Party. Your constituency is made up of everyone, and your job and your focus, obviously, is to hear from and help everyone. But I'd love to hear about the contrast, coming from, the differences in how things get done, one, locally, and two, when you're in the majority versus now, being in more of a consensus-building role, New York State Senate.
Sure. Particularly as a majority legislator, the interesting thing about the Nassau County Legislature is that, we had a 12-7 majority, but the reality is that, for most of us, we're all from Nassau County. Mm-hmm. So yes, we have differences of opinion. There are slight differences, North Shore, South Shore, in particular communities.
Sure.
But we're all trying to get to the same place. We might have different paths on how we want to get there. But there was a lot of working together. You'd be surprised, even in the Nassau County Legislature, being in the majority. Of course, my success legislatively was not dependent upon that.
Right.
Simply because we had the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the case certainly in the New York State Legislature.
Right.
There are tremendous differences between Western New York, the Northern Tier, our interests here on Long Island. Mm-hmm. So you're dealing with geographically a lot of different interests. But also, politically, you're dealing with a lot of different interests.
Sure.
I mean, we're all trying to make the state successful, but we definitely have different ideas on how we're going to go about it. So the transition from the county legislature in terms of legislation, in terms of grant funding, and being able to deliver for your district is certainly different. My role in the Senate and what I've concentrated on this year really is building relationships, and that's what it's all about as a minority member.
Sure.
Identifying people on the majority side that you can work with, and not just generally, but even on specific issues.
Right.
For example, I've got a couple of bills that I'll be trying to push next session through the Labor Committee, which I'm honored to be able to serve on.
Well, we're happy to have you there.
Where we'll be working with Jessica Ramos to
Yeah.
try and make sure those bills come to fruition.
Right.
Or Senator Rivera, on health issues. It's that opportunity to build relationships really that's at the heart of being able to accomplish things legislatively.
Yeah. And, it's got to be eye-opening in a way. We live in the bubble we live in, right? And you talk about the differences between the North and the South Shore and Nassau, how those communities interact. But someone from upstate New York, their values and their interests are so dynamically different than a suburban community.
Sure.
Right? And obviously the city has its own concerns and its issues and what it tries to push and whatever else. The state of New York is large and very diverse. And, someone from the Republican Party all the way upstate and someone from the Republican Party down here on the island, different animals, right? Because of different needs and different perspectives and whatever else. So when you talk about consensus building, that there's a lot to get to, right?
The big key is listening and learning. Right?
Sure.
There's a lot of stuff. Now that I'm outside of the sort of Nassau County bubble in that sense, and Suffolk County bubble, Long Island bubble. There's a lot I need to learn, and so part of it has been in that building relationships, listening to what the different interests are across the state, and how can we work together to achieve things that mutually benefit all of our constituents.
So one thing I like to point out is, in terms of community service, in terms of being there for the public, another aspect of all of this is you've been a volunteer firefighter for 30 plus years, right?
Yes.
It's always interesting to me to find people on their off hours when they could be spending time at home, they could be doing other things, and they say, you know what, put me in the most dangerous possible situation. If there's an emergency, call on me, and I will be there. And if you could just speak a little bit to what the fire service has meant to you and what you've been proud of accomplishing in your time there.
It's been life-changing. I had the opportunity to join basically as a kid. I think I was 22 when I joined. And it's probably one of the most rewarding things that I've had the opportunity to be able to do. It truly is neighbors helping neighbors, and particularly the volunteer fire service. And that's not just to say it's the fire service, our auxiliary police, our EMS personnel do a tremendous job. But you're right. Those are the individuals that'll get up in the middle of the night, leave their dinner table, leave their job, and go put their lives on the line to protect the lives and property of others. There's no better expression of love and respect for your fellow neighbor than doing that. And so part of the focus, certainly up in the state legislature, is are there ways that we can provide them further support?
Right.
For example, we passed made permanent the lung presumption for volunteer firefighters. Obviously they're exposed to a variety of toxins. We want to make sure that there's a presumption if something were to happen to them that they're entitled to those benefits that that the New York State provides. But it's tremendous, and I would encourage. It's been great experience. There is a shot of adrenaline that you get that I don't think has been duplicated. Certainly not in my life any other way than when the tones go off and you have the opportunity to get out there and whether it's going into a burning building or going to help somebody who's having a medical episode or a car accident or whatever the circumstances may be. There's something special about knowing that you are their backup plan.
Right.
There is no one else.
Right.
And that makes the job tremendously rewarding, and it's a nice diversion from the day job, so to speak.
Yeah, no, I
get the opportunity to do something directly positive.
Yes, I completely agree. And listen, to volunteer fire service, it's not like it was when you first came in, right? And now more than ever, we need heroes. We need people that are coming out of high school and want to get involved, that want to learn about this very specific function that is necessary for our overall community, and also understand that it's not just for altruism's sake. It's very altruistic. It's very, very great to say, I'm going to put myself in the background to help somebody else with whatever level of emergency that they might have. But there's more to it. You know, there are folks all across communities across the state and the country that recognize the importance of this work, and they value that character that somebody has. So it's not just a way to help your community; it's a way to help yourself. So
No question about it. And even in terms of monetary value of that service, I believe they came out recently with a study that's saying statewide, the volunteer fire service provides a $6 billion annual benefit to residents versus what you would have to do to pay for that service that's being received as a volunteer.
Of course. Yeah, no, it's a big deal. And, again, it just stands alongside what you're doing, right? As a local legislator, now as a state senator, that character that it takes to put yourself in the line of fire that way. I know you to be someone that will walk into a difficult room when there's a tough issue and people need to talk and they need to vent. The difference between life and death and just some people being upset, and that should be applauded as well.
Yeah, it definitely is. You learn a lot about yourself when you put yourself into those situations. That definitely helps you in this job, no question.
Sure. So one of the initiatives, there's a lot to talk about here, but one of the initiatives that you had this year, and you talk about being in the minority and maybe having the consensus build to get things done, but one of the things you wanted to get out in the world is have June recognized as Aphasia Awareness Month. And so let's talk a little bit about what aphasia is so everybody understands what that is, and then what the process was like, why that was important, and what that victory felt like.
It was brought to our attention, first of all, from a constituent,
Sure.
Who was suffering with the condition, and I had to educate myself on it quite a bit, and Matt was certainly helpful in that regard. It's almost the equivalent of when you have a stroke. It impacts your speech. It impacts, and the difficult part about it is that the mind is functioning, but the body's ability to communicate information is affected. And as somebody who's pretty involved, in the community, I was surprised that was something that I had never heard about.
Right.
And part of the challenge and part of the benefit to making June Aphasia Awareness Month is to bring awareness to it, to bring awareness to those that are suffering with that, essentially in silence, thinking that no resources are available to them, and letting them know what resources are there for them. So working with my colleagues in the state Senate, we unanimously passed a resolution to make June Aphasia Awareness Month. We work to ensure, we just had yesterday, as a matter of fact, an aphasia awareness summit, an open house,
right,
to allow not only individuals who are suffering with it, but anyone who wanted to come in and get some information about resources that are available as well. And the opportunity to bring that awareness, we had the dome lighting over at the Nassau County Legislature. We had our own press event to get information out there as well. It was very worthwhile, and I do want to thank Matt for bringing that to my attention, and I was happy to be able to get something done for that. But this is the first step in a much longer journey in getting information out.
Sure. But again, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier: listening, understanding, and then acting on that. And I think that's great. Really brings to mind like some of the viral videos we saw in years past where people were trying to raise awareness for certain things and dumping cold buckets of water on themselves or whatever else. And this is just another avenue. It's maybe the government avenue in trying to shine light on an issue that we should all maybe know a little bit more about. So I want to, again, commend you for taking the time to listen to people and putting it in. And, a couple of things that are close to my heart as well, but things that you've been working on these past 7 months or so. One being funding for infrastructure, and two, strengthening the workforce. Obviously, labor very important to us, and it's great to know that we have people that we can go to where we can kind of cut out a couple of hours of dialogue because you understand the issue already. So we don't have to go through the history of this is why labor exists and this is what our values are. We can just go in and say, here's the issue. And it doesn't mean we get a yes. It doesn't mean the thing gets done. What it means is we have a voice. You take the time to listen and add that to everything, that surrounds that issue and informs your decisions. So
And that's the great thing too, is that not just myself, but as a Long Island delegation, we have senators who understand the importance of labor and the importance of infrastructure to our success as an island. So whether it's Jack Martins or Patricia Canzaneri Fitzpatrick,
Right.
or Anthony Palumbo, Dean Murray,
Right.
Alexis White. Goodness, Mario Matera. I gotta mention Mario. Come on.
He's got some involvement in labor.
He's got some
right?
involvement in labor, right? We all understand the issues well, and you've got an eager group that's looking to move the chains and move the ball forward.
Yeah, and listen, being on the local government committee as well, that's a big, it's a big help to us again. Just knowing that we have someone there that we can talk to, that understands local government, again, in the way that you do, because you have experience with it, but also having experience on the labor side. So when there are issues, good ideas come to the Senate all the time, right? We see that all the time, and they're all very well intentioned, but sometimes there's unintended consequences. And being able to come in and say, hey, listen, I get that this is a good idea, but if we do it exactly this way, it's going to harm my folks that provide government services to the residents in Suffolk County. Or someone in Nassau County can come to you and say that, or somebody upstate can come to you and say the same thing, and bring that into the discussion so that the committees can maybe make the best possible choice on putting forward a bill, amending a bill, advancing a bill, not advancing a bill. And I think, again, it's hugely valuable to us. It's, I think, hugely valuable to the constituents to know that the people making decisions have an understanding of the issues.
No question. And look, you even look at two of the initiatives we'll be looking to push. They got introduced towards the tail end of session this year. They're going to need to be tinkered with a little bit, but we'll be looking to push them in 2024, specifically with respect to apprenticeship programs. It's important, and this is something that we did at the county level that we're looking to do at the statewide level. You want to make sure that apprenticeship programs are actually graduating apprentices.
Yeah.
There are many out there that have apprenticeship programs for show, and you want to make sure that those are eliminated. So requiring a minimum graduation rate from an apprenticeship program is incredibly important.
Sure.
Conversely, you want to make sure that on construction projects, which is the second piece of this, that apprentices are actually being used. So setting a minimum percentage requirement of apprentices that must be employed on a job site is incredibly important. It gets labor and gets the communities and business the experienced and trained personnel to make sure that they can do the job quickly, efficiently, and at lower cost and safely, most importantly.
Sure.
And also too, again, you mentioned talking to people. I was at a TWU event a couple of weeks ago, and I spoke with a lady who came up and mentioned that her husband was a subway operator, and about a month into COVID, because of his exposure as a subway operator, ended up unfortunately passing away.
Yep.
And she did not know, transit never told her, she did not know that she was entitled to a death benefit through workers' compensation. But because this happened at the start of COVID, and there's only a 2-year statute of limitations,
Right.
her family now, by operation of law, would be shut out from being able to apply for those benefits. So one of the things that we're looking to do for municipal employees is a COVID reopener.
Right.
Not only for death cases, but a COVID reopener as well for anyone who was impacted by COVID, so that they can get the benefits that they were entitled to, because there was so much confusion
Sure.
during the early part of the pandemic, and so impossible to get information back and forth.
Yeah.
We owe it to our municipal workforce, and particularly to those families who unfortunately their loved ones put their lives on the line to make sure that government still functioned
Right.
while we were all hunkered down in our homes. We owe it to them to make sure that they get every possible benefit that they're entitled to.
I completely
so those
agree.
are things we'll be pushing next year.
I completely agree. And I remember early days of COVID, I'd love to say that I was pushing out a message to my membership once a day, but I was pushing sometimes multiple times a day. And literally those messages were just to say, hey, federal guidance changed. Something new on the state level had changed. At a certain point in time, the then Governor Cuomo was under an executive order and just pushing out new guidance left and right. And we wanted to keep people as up to date as possible because the rules kept changing, right? Nobody knew, can I go to work? Can I not go to work? There was a point in time where, the guidance was you can't be closer than 6 feet for more than 10 minutes without a mask, right? That was what the rule was kind of floated around as. but people were upset that somebody maybe walked by them in the hallway without a mask. And we said, well, based on the current guidance, that should be okay, but then things changed, became more strict, less strict, and so that fluctuation in information. But now here we are after the fact, still don't know everything that we can know, and the long-term effects still not known, right? So there's a lot to discuss there, and I don't think this is a conversation that's going away anytime soon.
No, not at all.
Yeah. So, just with regards to the labor movement, we really are seeing great energy across the country. Folks that you never thought would even try to organize are organizing in droves. We've got strikes happening all over the place. We know there's a pending UPS strike. We've seen strikes in Europe like you wouldn't believe, shutting down the country. Different countries at different points in time. Not that I'm advocating in that direction, but what I mean to say is folks are beginning to realize the value of their labor, and not just what we've been told since we were young, right? You exchange your time for money. I think there's been a greater understanding, especially in the younger generation. You're not just trading time for money, you're trading who you wanted to be for who you will become, right? And your life changes. And I think of certain professions. You can think of, the fire service in that way, too. There are things you hear, there's things you see, there's things you are exposed to. When you think about dangerous chemicals, when we talk about dangerous chemicals, some of those chemicals are inert until they catch on fire. And they're up and in the air, and people are being exposed to it, and they're doing it to help other people. And there seems to be more and more awareness. People are realizing it's not just the value of an hour in exchange for doing something. For an hour of my time, I get this. But it's also, how did work change my life? And so these conversations become more, maybe more heated, but they become greater in depth. Rather than just sitting down and saying, okay, are we suggesting that somebody has a job that everybody agrees needs to be done, but the person doing the job doesn't deserve enough money to keep the lights on and feed their kids, right? And that's not a you problem. That is a universal problem, coast to coast, and probably globally. These are big issues and big things, but it's very heartening for me, at least, to see how much people are starting to understand that coming together, using their voice collectively, private citizen coming and speaking to you, who has an understanding of these things and has the motivation to try and get things done, even on an individual level, is great. But to be able to sit down and say, hey, me and 10,000 other people, and here's proof, feel this particular way, and we really need help. And it kind of helps frame that question to some of your colleagues that aren't part of the labor movement, that have some loose understanding. I've yet to screen someone for political office when they come to our organization that hasn't told me they didn't come from a union household, or they knew somebody in a union, or sometimes their neighbors walked the dog past a house, that the guy in there, his great-grandfather used to be union. But to understand labor, to understand what it means to, not just trade your time for money, but to exchange who you wanted to be for who you are going to become, that's a big value to us. It's very important to be able to have those conversations with folks like you, and you had a great little group of folks here from the island that have that same understanding. It's very important. I guess there's no question there. I just want to really reiterate.
And you said it really well, and I love the way that you put it. And it's so incredibly important. I mean, it's not just about dollars and cents. It's about safety. It's about making sure that your interests are represented. Look, every employer, you have some wonderful companies out there that really do look after their employees. Mm-hmm. Not everybody does. So from the Triangle Factory fire, where sort of the modern labor movement started. Right. It's been about not just dollars and cents, but it's been about making sure that you're going about the jobs in conditions that are safe, bringing about quality of life improvements to your employees, and making sure that they're treated fairly.
Yeah.
So it's the union movement's incredibly important, particularly here on Long Island.
Sure.
And it's encouraging to see its growth.
Yeah, and again, we are trying to address the system in which corporations are mandated. They are supposed to maximize their value for the shareholders, right? They have to go out and do the best they can with profits. So little things like insulin, what it costs to make, what it costs to sell, what it costs to receive, huge discrepancies in that. but the corporations are supposed to. It's their fiduciary responsibility, and they could be personally liable if they don't try and maximize profits, if they don't do everything they can. So how do we craft legislation? And I'm not asking you to solve this, but this is the larger question that the labor movement is trying to solve for all working people, represented or not. How do we craft a system that still works as capitalism, that still builds in these financial incentives without creating these huge wealth gaps, where there are people with billions and billions and billions of dollars, and there are millions of people who are working 2 or 3 jobs, still paycheck to paycheck, just to keep the lights on with no life whatsoever. I mean, much bigger than something New York State Senate can just handle, right? Much bigger than something maybe Congress and the federal Senate can handle. This is a bigger question that needs to really be handled, society-wide.
You find that so often in government too, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is one of those, you've got naturally competing interests. You recognize on the one hand that people who put their time and their capital at risk to create jobs and to build a product deserve to be rewarded, but at the same token, they're getting those rewards off of the back of individuals who come and show up to work every day, and they need to be treated fairly as well. They need to get a living wage they can provide for their families.
Right.
So striking that balance, yes, is definitely a challenge, not one that I think we'll be able to solve today.
No.
By dialogue and conversation and working together, getting smart people around the table to actually come up with, hammer out some solutions. There's hope certainly for the future that we'll be able to do that.
Yeah, you referenced the triangle waist shirt fire, right?
Yes.
Am I saying that right?
That's right.
Yeah. I think it was the waist shirt, yes. All right, it sounded weird in my mouth. So anyway, but that was something that really brought to light the need for additional fire safety, right? So now we're tying this all together. It was a labor thing, but it really set standards for everyone everywhere to make sure that there were fire exits, that there was fire suppression, and this was a human rights issue. It wasn't a you're not paying me enough issue, or the boss is making too much issue. But when I say chipping away, finding those issues, identifying those issues, and creating a system where it's equitable for all, where folks have enough money, not just to get by, but also to put money back into the economy and keep things moving around, churning, and for the common good, of the country and mankind. So
Absolutely.
I know it's a big issue, something I think about a lot, and hard to keep back when I get the opportunity to bring it up. But you know what? Let me move forward from here. Obviously, big topic. But here we are. We're coming up on July 4th weekend, which is awesome. Maybe session has wound down enough. We can get back to focusing on the grassroots and everything else. But are there any things that we need to know about coming up for you coming through the rest of the year?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is for me the best time of the year.
Mm-hmm.
You talk about getting out of the bubble, and Albany certainly is one. This is the time for me to be back out in the district. So, I know that for myself, there's a good chance if you happen to live in the 5th Senatorial District at some point over the course of the next 6.5 months, you'll be getting a visit from me at your front door. So
Nice.
It's one of the things that I've sort of continued as a tradition from Assemblyman Parola 35 years ago, going out there and making sure that we get out in the streets. Because as you mentioned, I can't tell you how many fantastic ideas I've gotten just from conversations on somebody's front porch. Getting out there and interacting and seeing how we can be helpful and listening to people's ideas, and things that concern them and trying to work through those solutions are a big part of what I do. We do have a couple of events, obviously, that are coming up, in the next few weeks. We have coming up on the 1st, we are doing our Freedom Food Drive over at the Stop and Shop in East Meadow. That's 2525 Hempstead Turnpike in East Meadow. So we're encouraging people to, working with Island Harvest, so we're encouraging people to make sure they get out there with non-perishable food items. On July 5th, we are working with the State Department of Environmental Conservation to do a water chestnut pull, actually in Mill Pond. So water chestnuts are an invasive species. If you ever saw the seeds, they look like little alien pods. So the best way to actually remove those is to, one, catch them before the pods drop,
Right.
but two, to do it by hand. They have mechanical harvesters that will do that, but apparently it's easier to pull them up by the roots if you actually do it by hand. So we'll
Right.
be out there in the pond in kayaks,
Nice.
which you usually can't do in Mill Pond, to get those water chestnuts out. We also have our scam prevention seminar over at the Merrick Library, also on Tuesday, July 1st. So that is actually going to be, just trying to get the times, from 1 to 2 p.m. But we have a host of events that are coming up over the course of the, not just
Sure.
in July, but over the course of the remainder of the
Right.
year. I'm back to doing my mobile office hours.
Awesome.
So we travel all around the district to different schools and libraries that'll allow us to host them, and come to our constituents where they are. But you can always check our website. We can always reach out to us by email at rhoads@nysenate.gov, or you can check us out on Facebook or Instagram. We even, for a brief amount of time, had a TikTok page, but that didn't work out quite as well.
Yes.
I'm not as good with the dances and all that stuff. But but check out the Senator Steve Rhoads Facebook page or Senator Rhoads Instagram page for updates on information. We're constantly pushing information out on them.
That's awesome. And I just want to point out one other thing, because I just think it's a great thing to do. You have the Christmas in July, that toy drive.
Yes.
So getting folks now, getting some stuff together so that this way, as the summer months are moving on, I mean, you can tell us about the program, but
Yeah, that's actually coming up on July 15th. We're working with two tremendous organizations. We're working with King Fighting Cancer, and also working with the Marine Toys for Tots.
Awesome.
To do a toy drive in July. The location is actually at the Hicksville train station, so we'll be there
Okay.
from 11 to 1. I'm getting a little assist here.
Yeah,
from,
no, it's good.
from
Listen,
my-
it's a
from my
lot to
chief of
keep in your
staff.
head. A lot to keep in your head. I get it. Well, listen, Senator, I really want to, again, thank you for taking the time to talk, on air with us today. Look forward to continue working with you in the coming years. Obviously, a lot of labor issues. I have big ones and little ones to talk about, so we keep those conversations going.
And that's one of the things I love about the 5th Senate District. It's cops, it's firemen, it's union members that are out there working hard every single day. We have a great cross-section of people in the 5th Senate District. It's an honor to represent them, and I'm looking forward to working with you to, again, make sure we're making progress. And thanks for the invitation.
Absolutely, much appreciated. So my guest this morning, Senator Steve Rhoads, 5th Senate District over in Nassau County, but working for all of New York, obviously sitting on some great committees. And to our listeners, we'll speak to you next week.